I'm really excited to be here. I'd like to introduce Tara, who is my colleague, to tell you a little bit about GSVlabs before we get started, and then we'll have our first speaker, Jenny, up on the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, guys. Haven't done anything yet, but thank you. So as Keisha mentioned, I'm quickly going to run through and tell you a little bit about GSVlabs and how we support our enterprise partners and some of the large organizations that we're working with. And then we'll hear from Jenny on some of the mega trends in the future of work. We have a great panel for you talking about how to create a culture of innovation within your organization. And then our CIO, Alec Wright, is going to sit down with Gary Swart and talk about the future of work with him. And then we'll have some drinks and hors d'oeuvres for you. So our GSVlabs mission is to support entrepreneurs, startups, and corporations and introduce those corporations to exponential technologies, business models, and ideas that will help them accelerate their future and stay relevant in an emerging technology age. Our enterprise innovation programming is centered around three main kind of pinnacles of programs. So we do innovation scouting, innovation sprints, and our breakthrough programs. And through these programs, we work with our corporate partners to generate tangible ROI. We work with our corporate partners to research, identify, and vet startup technologies that may be interesting or relevant to them for partnership and investment opportunities. We then work with both sides, the startup and the corporate partner, to identify strategic value, mutually aligned agendas, and set expectations. We do enterprise readiness training with some of our enterprise-focused startups on how they can most effectively work with large organizations. And then we'll also do large public startup challenges where we attract, vet, and then manage a community of startups all geared around one kind of innovation goal or industry. Our innovation sprints are 3, 6, and 12-week programs where we work with our corporate partners when they have new product ideas or new partnership initiatives. We help them within that time frame rapidly prototype and test in the market these solutions with the feedback of engineers, designers, and experts. Our breakthrough innovation programs are kind of a culmination of each of these exercises. We host events, 2 private think tank workshops, 1 large public industry summit, and a series of happy hour and networking events. We facilitate these high impact connections between innovation leaders and startups. And then we manage that engagement with those startups to help facilitate the launch of pilots, partnerships, and investments. We also do 2 proprietary research reports, 1 focused on megatrends and 1 focused on some of the startup benchmarkings that are coming out of this industry. Really quickly, I want to talk to you about some of the other happenings at GSVlabs. So as all of you may know, you're sitting in one of our innovation centers. We currently have 2 innovation centers, 1 here in Silicon Valley and 1 in Boston. Over the past 6 years, we've been working to increase our programming and our support to the early stage entrepreneurs that we support. With that, in February, we launched GSV Passport. Since then, we've onboarded almost 8,000 members, predominantly entrepreneurs from across the globe, to access the resources that we've built here in our innovation centers and then transferred online. So we identified a lack of startup-focused tools. There's a lot of tools out there, but they're in siloed locations and difficult for early stage entrepreneurs to identify. It's very difficult to build an engaged community, and there's a lack of connectivity to outside networks. So our solution is GSV Passport, which we've, as I mentioned, launched with our own community and have expanded to markets outside of Silicon Valley. We're also offering this program to a lot of our corporate partners, our VC partners, and our university partners that are trying to activate their own innovation networks. And through GSV Passport, our partners can leverage our community and networking tools, accelerate capital development for their entrepreneurs and their startups, and they'll have access to all of our insights and learning resources. Through our company and member directory that we'll manage on behalf of our partners, through the Slack communities that we build, through our mentor facilitation platform. So along with our mentor network that we've developed, our companies can leverage their own ecosystem of experts to support their own community. We also have a venture capital connect portal of over 450 investors that are constantly getting updated profiles on all of the startups on our platform so they can rapidly identify and connect with startups that are relevant to their own portfolio. We have a content management system. We build and maintain our own content for our startup community, but we also have the ability to facilitate content management for our partners. And then we have our preferred service provider marketplace, which offers any startup in our ecosystem almost $700,000 in credits and discounts from some of the core technology platforms that you need to build a successful company. Through GSV Passport and GSV Passport Plus, we're enabling organizations that are looking to tap into our existing GSV network to support their entrepreneurs while also building their own internal communities. We have a couple of upcoming innovation centers as well that I want to put on your radar. Currently, as I mentioned, we're located in Silicon Valley and in Boston. And actually this spring, we're launching in GSVlabs Pittsburgh. Over the past 18 months, we have been working with a lot of the local ecosystem players, universities, foundations, government partners, to identify the best place for us to be, where the gaps are in the market, and how we can fill them. We've locked in on a space. We're working with some of our partners to establish our programming and support for the startups coming out of the Pittsburgh ecosystem, and we're really excited to tell you about how you can be involved. So the first step, the Thrival Conference is coming up September 18th through 20th. This is the largest technology conference in Pittsburgh, and we're working with the program team to recruit participation from Silicon Valley and Boston, startups to come to Pittsburgh to pitch and to attend this great event. So if you're interested in the Thrival Conference, please reach out to me. I'm happy to connect you with the program team. The second piece of that is the Amplify Pittsburgh program. So we're really excited to be one of the first partners of the Thrival Conference team to recruit individuals from other emerging technology markets that want to come to Pittsburgh. It'll be an all-expense-paid trip for the week of the Thrival Conference to really be embedded in the Pittsburgh ecosystem, meet with startups, visit with all of the relevant players in the ecosystem, and then that's it. All they ask is that you promote Pittsburgh outside of that trip. So when you come back to Silicon Valley, you're a proponent for the technology scene in Pittsburgh. Then we'll be, in 2020, when we launch in Pittsburgh, we'll be having our Startup Challenge and launch, so stay tuned for that. We'll be obviously in our newsletter letting you all know about it. So we're really excited about the Pittsburgh launch. Hope you all are too, and hope you'll participate in that. And without further ado, really excited about Pittsburgh. I'd like to introduce Jenny Dearborn, who will be giving a Megatrends presentation on the future of work. So it's just the green.
Thank you so much. I want to share with you some of the trends that are happening and shaping the future of work. I retired on January 1st from Hewlett-Packard, that's not true, SAP, SAP, where I was Executive Vice President of Human Resources. I was there for 7 years. I have had C-level jobs at Hewlett-Packard, Sun Microsystems, SuccessFactors, SAP, and others in selling HR services, selling HCM software, or being an internal practitioner in HR. So in my roles, it's very important to be thinking about what are the bigger trends, what's happening in the market, and how can corporations adapt to that. So I want to share some of these with you. And to just kind of put this all in context, where we are now is really on the precipice of the fourth industrial revolution. Industrial revolutions are very normal, they're very natural, they happen cyclically, This is nothing that should be surprising. It's always good when thinking about where we are now is to put that into some sort of context, right? So not too long ago, everyone on Earth was a subsistence farmer. You were lucky if you had a little bit of muscle in an animal to give you some oomph. Our very first factory systems were put next to waterways in 1780s. Mass production, a lot of people think about the automotive industry, but this is actually the meat packing industry, right? In Chicago, digital revolution, some people call this the computer revolution, when we started having logic circuits, things connected to a primitive internet. And then where we are now, the fourth industrial revolution, which is really signified by cyber physical systems, the coming together of a physical world and a cyber world. So if we look at, and then we sort of double click on that, the fourth industrial revolution, well, what are the trends that are happening now to really solidify where we are now in history? So those really fall into big data, technology, how socially connected we are as a human species, our demographic shifts as a species, how complex our work environments are, and rapidly shifting markets. So let's take a look at a couple of these megatrends. Just by a show of hands, how many people are wearing some sort of connected device on their body? Fitbit, Garmin, Apple Watch, something like that. What about connected devices in your home? Smoke detector, security system, appliances, Roomba, something like that. How many people have more than one mobile device? Remember, an iPad is a mobile device, right? Okay. So you can see here we've got a significant uptake in connected devices. The term IoT, Internet of Things, started in about 2009. We were fine up till then when we had sensors on bridges to measure traffic flow and vibrations on the Golden Gate Bridge, or sensors in water pipes to make sure there's no leakage, and we've got effective irrigation systems. But IoT, Internet of Things, everything, started really when we started putting sensors on our bodies and having them in every aspect of our lives, and we started having that cyber physical system. So that will continue to increase dramatically. Everything that can be connected to the internet will be connected to the internet, right? Which creates a tremendous amount of data, which is why the number one job that is being sought after is a data scientist, right? Someone to make sense of all of this data. Every company is becoming a technology company, right? Every company needs data scientists to make sense of whatever data they have, right? That is the competitive advantage, is that service that you can provide by knowing your customers better. All products are becoming commoditized. It is the service of knowing your customers through data analytics that is the differentiator for successful companies. So technology. Just like everything that can be connected to the internet will be, everything that can be automated will be, right? Automated. We think of automation. 83% of jobs that earn less than $20 an hour or less, will be eliminated due to automation in the next 5 years. So there's 4 job categories that are in that $20 an hour or less. That is driver, fast food, front of the house retail, and call center, right? So we're from Silicon Valley. You see these Waymos everywhere. Important to note that driver is the highest self-identified job category in the United States. More people consider themselves driver. Bus, taxis, Uber, Lyft, anybody who gets paid, 18-wheeler, long haul, trucks, all of that, right, combined. Also, fast food. Again, I took these pictures myself. You guys have seen these, different tasks being automated inside of fast food restaurants. When we say that jobs will be eliminated due to automation, it's important to note that what we mean is changed, right? Jobs will be significantly changed through automation. When the ATM machine came out in the United States, everyone said this is the end of the bank teller, right? This is automation replacing humans. But in the 30 years after the ATM machine came out, there are more bank tellers than there were before the ATM machine came out, right? But their job is significantly changed, 98% changed. They're doing more sales, more services, more customer interaction, more critical thinking, more problem solving, less doling out and collecting money, right? So when we say jobs are disappearing, very important to note, it means our prior thinking of that job, that very confined set of job tasks, is changing. So just like in those 4 categories, driver, front of the house retail, fast food, and call centers, you make a long list of every task that worker does when they do their job. Maybe there's 1,000 tasks. You say, can automation take over that task, or this task, or that task? What are the tasks that are left? That is what a human will do, right? And what are all the things that your human can't do because they don't have time, right? And that you want them to do, and only if they had more time and they weren't doing all these mind-numbing, soul-crushing tasks, they could do, right? We want jobs to be more human, right? That is the role that we have in, as we think about evolving companies and jobs of the future, is to think about that detailed task analysis. Where can automation take over those tasks, and how can we elevate those jobs so that they're more human? How socially connected we are is another significant mega trend in the future of work. 50% of us around the world are online. 50% of us around the world live in cities. About 2/3 of us are unique mobile users, about 1/3 active social mobile users. What I don't have on here is the decline in the sale of new laptops and new desktops. So it's about a 30% decline annually. We are trending hard towards a mobile world. People in emerging economies absolutely do not have laptops or desktops. Another significant shift is really how we are evolving as a species demographically. So we are aging. So congratulations to us as a species. We are aging very nicely. We are living longer. We are healthier longer. If you are born today in North America, there's a 50% chance you will live to 105. If you're born today in Spain or Japan, there's a 50% chance you'll live to 110. So this is great. You can see here that populations, Europe, North America, Latin America, Antarctica, you know, it's officially a continent, is fairly stagnant, right? And we're only seeing global growth in Asia and Africa, right? So we are aging. We are living longer. And because of this, we have more generations in the workplace. This is not new information. If anybody says to you, oh my God, millennials, I've got this new term, it's called millennials, it's something really amazing. Not true, not new. We were surprised about 10 years ago as researchers when we came to realize that the millennials were the largest generation ever in world history. Researchers went and asked millennials, how do you think and how do you feel and what's important to you? And they said, we want to live outside and we want to work with our friends and we want to make a difference and change the world. And it turns out if you ask a baby boomer or anybody else when they're 21, what do they want to do with their lives, they're going to say the same thing. So you give a millennial 2 kids and a mortgage and they're going to basically behave the same as a baby boomer. So we will have, we currently have 5 generations in the workplace. Within 50 years we will have 6. And that's something for us to be thinking about as employers and people who run companies, is how do we accommodate this? How do we create services to support a healthy aging workforce? So one of the things that comes from this is, well, how do I prepare, right? How long will I have to work? My parents worked for 40 years. I will work for 50 years. My kids will work for 60 years, full-time, saving for retirement. It is not crazy at all to think of a full-time career of 60, 65, 70 years. So We have to save differently. We have to pace ourselves differently. We have to take care of ourselves differently. So how do you prepare for this? What do you do to get yourself ready? What can you possibly learn to prepare yourself for a 60-year career, right? Used to be the case, my dad's a retired accountant. You would go learn to be an accountant, and then you're an accountant, and then you're a retired accountant, and that's it, right? Dead accountant. But there's so much change now. How can you, with information changing every 3 or 4 years, how do you possibly be prepared for a 60, 65-year career? This is interactive. What do you study? What do you learn? What's uniquely human? What won't be outsourced? What won't be automated? What won't go online? Leadership, team effectiveness, culture, something about not sucking your will to live. Yes, all of that is true. Yes, sir. Okay, cool. Don't understand the gaming reference, but that's okay. I'm going to get this pretty soon, so I'm going to keep going, but thank you. So human skills, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, interaction, empathy, leadership, listening skills, right? Resilience, grit, problem solving. These are fundamental human skills. The World Economic Forum and every other reputable organization is saying these are the skills that will differentiate you in the future, right? If you have all the tech skills in the world, but you don't have this, you are a danger to our society, right? Your fabulous understanding of what the next technology must be built on an ethical framework, or it is dangerous for you to go off and create some new software without understanding the implications of that. So the most important skills of the future are human skills, right? That's what won't be automated, that what won't be outsourced, it won't go to technology, right? As we do the job task analysis and we look at all of the 1,000 tasks that a particular job will have, and we cross out each one and say, that can be automated, that can be automated, what's left, right? It's human skills. So again, here's another list of the breakdown of jobs that are going to be most probably eliminated due to automation. Remember, it's not eliminated, it is highly changed, right? So the old thinking of the job. Loan officers, anybody ever buy a house and you go to whatever First American Title or something and you get a stack of paper that's an entire ream and it's got all the little stickies out the side, sign here, sign there, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, this could be so easily automated. There are 1,000 steps, you can't mess any of them up, but it's a pretty predictable set of 1,000 steps, right? So there is a dozen startups that are trying to put loan officers out of business, and they're very successful. So again, what is difficult to automate or hard for computers, fine motor skill manipulation, creativity, social perception. Actually, there's lots of robotics that are very advanced with fine motor skills manipulation, but we'll see. And then, just for fun, I am sharing this. This is the breakdown of all the states in the United States whose jobs in those states will be most probably impacted to automation, right? So traditional manufacturing heavy states at the top, the average across the country is 27%. You've got at as high as 30 in some and as low as 20 in the others. And then just for fun, I color-coded them by how they voted in 2016. It's just a little fun I had. So how complex our work environments are is the next sort of mega trend in the future of work. We used to have, when people would have a 40-year career, 40-year gold watch, and it was a very standard sort of pyramid, a lot of workers at the bottom, and then people would, it was a very, very few number of workers at the top, and those were the best paying jobs. The idea was if you just stayed doing that job, right, and with time you stay with that company, you'll eventually get a promotion, and then you'll get a parking space, and then you'll get a better title, and then someone's going to give you a staff, and then you'll just eventually, you just kind of ride that escalator, you know, and there's this entitlement or complacency, those career, you know, employees. I started at 8 years at Hewlett Packard. Lots of people left and right that were sort of just riding that along in the 90s. And what we need to anticipate now is 60, 70-year careers of constant change, right? Work, learn, change, work, learn, change, work, learn, change, right? A shorter period of education only up front, and a longer period of education and work combined. You're going to start a job, you're going to learn it, you're going to be the top of your industry, the industry's going to change, you're going to have to regroup, get re-educated, learn something new, have a new skill, right? Become the top of your game, be educated, the world's going to change. You will have a longer career of ups and downs, and not a constant career of just up and to the right. Also, we have more than 50% of the world right now are contract labor, freelancers, contractors, temps. And what's concerning is that all of our employment law is built to protect employees, right? So if you are employed by one company, then there is overarching employment law that protects you. There is no protection for contractors, temps, freelancers, and we've got 50% of our population overall, but also those freelancers and temps are vastly younger. So what's concerning about this, though, is that 65% of companies rely on temps and contractors for their core competency, right? This is not holiday, you know, excess flex staff. You know, during the holidays, I need people to come in and just help wrap presents, right? No, this is all year round core competence. What is the most important aspect of your business? You've got temps doing that work. So rapidly shifting markets. Again, it's the speed of how things are changing is the another significant mega trend. So as a quick reference, just looking at a 5-year change in time from 2013 to 2018. 2013, the 5 largest companies in the world, only one is a technology company. 5 years later, all of the largest companies in the world are technology companies. Every company is becoming a technology company. So there's about 12 million people in the United States who have tech jobs. 50% of those work inside a tech company, a tech job in a tech company. 50% are not in tech companies, right? Just as profitable. So what's also important to remember in this mega trend around how fast markets shift is, again, going back to fundamental human skills, right? And being deeply empathetic, right? So you here in the front, you said one of the most important human skills was empathy. When a corporation has empathy, when a company has empathy for its customers, it's always thinking about how can I better serve you, not what are my profits and what are my needs as a corporate entity. So remember, Blockbuster was not killed by Netflix. Blockbuster killed itself by not being empathetic to the needs of its customers, right? Apple did not kill the music industry. The music industry killed itself by not listening, by not being empathetic, by not caring deeply and always wanting to change and grow and advance so that it could better its customers' needs, right? So you create this space where people are unhappy, right? Some companies, when they have a monopoly, they take advantage of that customer unhappiness, and some companies change and adapt. And sometimes there's a huge space where disruptors can come in, right? So Airbnb did not kill the hotel industry. The hotel industry killed itself by not changing and adapting. So a quick case study that we all know very well because we're all here in the Valley. But we remember in one generation, in 25 years, in 1990, three biggest companies in the US are car companies. 36 billion in market capitalization, 250 billion in revenue, but 1.2 million employees, the entire supply chain up into the point of sale, right? So no aftermarket hubcaps and no, car dealerships or anything like that, just to the point of sale, right? Across many states, some people call those voters, remember? Anybody old enough like me to say, remember the expression, what's good for the auto industry is good for America? Remember that? So 25 years later, three largest companies are all tech companies, 1.09 trillion in market capitalization, about the same revenue with only 10% the employees, right? And a totally different demographic picture for these two industries, right? For the first one, 90% of those jobs, you just need a high school diploma, 10% you need a college degree. The next example, 100% of those people need an undergrad degree, 50% need a graduate degree, right? Completely different geographies too, right? So what's super important for us as we think about this future of this megatrend is what is that connection point? It's not let's fight technology, it's how we work with technology. Right? It's not that technology is taking our jobs, it's we are collaborating and working together, and we need to understand what role technology plays and what role is uniquely human, right? Where do we come together, right? There is no radiologist in the world that can read an x-ray better than artificial intelligence. Does that mean we don't need radiologists anymore? No. It means that they are now advancing in terms of their human skills, spending more time with patients, right? Working together, understanding how, it's not the AI is taking over their job, they are collaborating and advancing. Okay. So, and when we figure this out, there's huge economic benefits, right? Huge global GDP benefits, 16 trillion in global GDP. When we understand and we can unlock that magic of humans and technology working together. Right? Just like we have with every industrial revolution. Every 100 years, right, some amazing technology comes along and unlocks this incredible new level of human potential for us to take advantage of as a species, which advances us. And it's really about time that we think about advancing and having this better collaboration with technology, right? I like this slide. This is the average cognitive intensity of tasks done by employed college graduates. So it spikes about 2000. What were we doing in 2000 that was kind of fun? Right? We were like unlocking a puzzle. How is this going to work out? Can we figure it out? Oh, is the world going to end or is it going to be just fine? What were we doing in 2000? Y2K, right? And then January 1 came along. We were like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have paid Accenture all those tens of millions, right? So as employed college graduates, we like challenge. Right? We like stimulation at work. We like puzzles. We like to figure things out. We get endorphins going, right? That's what we want. We don't want jobs that are just, like you said, soul-crushing monotony, and you're embarrassed to tell your parents you've got 2 graduate degrees, and oh my God, I'm cutting and pasting spreadsheets all day long, right? I need some sort of software that automates that so that I can be more human. So, this is a plug for diversity, and I'll tell my quick Tesla story. So I drive a Tesla because I'm, legally obligated to because I live in Palo Alto. And my car knows that I'm a terrible driver, right? So I sit in my car. It says, hi, Jenny. It knows that it's me. It knows that I'm the only one in the car, operation of the doors, weight in the seats, all that stuff. It knows it's not my husband. And it doesn't have this technology yet, but someday it will. Let's say I'm driving along and there's an unavoidable crash. And my car knows that It sees 4 objects up ahead, and it knows there's 2 tall and 2 short. My car does a series of algorithms. It figures out that it's a family. What does my car do? Does my car choose? It's an unavoidable crash. Something bad's going to happen. Does my car say 1 consumer is more important than 4 randoms? Or does my car say 4 souls are more important than 1 soul? What is my car going to do? I don't know. But I know that they're thinking through these scenarios. There are companies making ethical decisions that impact our society. You guys know there's no law, there's no governing body, there's no overarching anything that says what should happen in situations like that. But whatever company makes the decision first, they're setting a precedent, right? And I know that my car can think faster than me and it can see more than I can see. So it's my car that's going to make that decision and not me. And I sure hope that the engineers or whoever in that room in Tesla come from every walk of life and every perspective and every socioeconomic background, and they're thinking about what's the right thing for society, not just shareholders. So, a plug for more diversity in technology, because it's technology companies that are driving this, that are leading this, that are making these decisions before consumer companies or healthcare companies or anything else. Technology companies are on the forefront. Is it all doom and gloom for human resources? You may not be in human resources, but in 2005, the significant business magazine said, why we hate HR. 10 years later, it's time to blow up HR and build something new. And then in 2018, in Germany, there's a cover says, human resources finally agile, how human resources work succeeds. So if you are in human resources in Germany, congratulations. Every place else in the world, you guys still suck. That's too bad. So anyway, jobs come and go, very normal. This is a very normal part of the Industrial Revolution cycle. We no longer need lamplighters. We no longer need people to carry ice blocks. We don't need people to set pins. We don't need people to, only in the 80s, right? They were only hiring people as typesetters at the New York Times, and they were deaf because it was so loud to work in the printing room. Right? In the 80s, they stopped doing that. So we won't need bartenders moving forward. But now, wait a minute, we still will. What will a bartender be in the future? What is the fundamental human skill? If you've got some system that is mixing all the drinks, what is the bartender going to do? Listening to your stories. The bartender is a therapist moving forward. Are we going to need fewer bartenders? No, we're probably going to need more because everyone's going to be so stressed about everything, about how their jobs are changing. So they're going to go down to the local saloon and they're going to press a button and some robot's going to make the drink and they're going to listen to your stories, right? So very important to come away knowing that there are more jobs available than there are jobs going away. Last month in the US, 8 million open jobs, right? 6 million people actively looking for work. Of the 8 million open jobs, 500,000 of those jobs required a computer science degree. We only graduate 45,000 computer science graduates a year across all of our universities combined, right? Am I saying we need more people with computer science degrees? We need more people with human skills and technology skills combined. That's really the holy grail. So, a lot of jobs being displaced or changing, and it really is falling on corporations to pay the bill for the retraining. So we're seeing that in the news constantly. Amazon just announced a couple days ago that they're putting $500 million towards retraining employees because they feel it's their responsibility and they can't just expect that a government agency is going to do that for them. So I'll end with this. Again, as we look at the cycles of the Industrial Revolution, it's important to note with each of these changes, we have higher literacy, We have greater longevity, we have better health, happiness, lower infant mortality, lower prison rates, lower violence, all good things when technology and humanity come together and we take a step back, we understand these mega trends and we take advantage of them and we're not scared by them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And we were really excited to have Jenny with us today. Next, I'd like to invite our panelists onto the stage. So I'm going to ask our moderator, Clay, as well as our panelists, Saba, Richard, and Becky, to come on up. Set the microphones on your chairs.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. And again, I just wanted to thank our panelists, Becky, Saba, and Richard for joining us today. During the panel discussion, we will address the changing ways that companies are approaching talent development, and we will discuss how corporates can find a balance between incorporating self-directed learning and aligning L&D with enterprise needs. Also, we will identify the skill development that is most in demand today, and that will be most in demand tomorrow. And finally, we will look at how all this relates to employee retention and creating a more effective and talented workforce of the future. Let's just take a minute or so, if you could introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background, just starting with you, Becky, coming down the line.
Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? Medium? Good. Cool. Awesome. I won't make you do a scale of 1 to 5. I am Becky Karsh. I'm the head of the people development team for our US and Canada region at Uber. I've been at Uber for about 3.5 years, so I've seen it all. Before that, meaning seen all of Uber. Before that, I did work in the college to career space. I built a startup which got acquired by another startup that did blended learning for college skills. And I was interested in what it looks like for adult education and that actual career space. So transferred over to Uber and been there ever since.
Hi, everyone. My name is Saba Baksamusa. I spent 4.5 years at Coursera building university partnerships there. I joined the team and was relatively young. The company was founded in 2012. I joined in 2015. We were about 100 people. Then we're over 350 now with like global offices. So have been part of the journey of how Coursera has been able to impact learning and skill development and talent transformation across the world, and really excited to talk to you a little bit about what we learned there in terms of how academic institutions can also play their role in global talent and skill development.
Hi, I'm Richard Price. I'm a research fellow at the Christensen Institute, actually just here on the 3rd floor. And my background is in a combination of a number of different fields. I studied computer science with the plan of going to medical school. I actually ended up working in finance for a little bit first. And then realized that a lot of my confusion about where to go started with just all the options that were available in higher education in my college experience, and decided that I wanted to take a deeper look into that later on in my career. So I jumped out of finance and came to the Institute to study disruptive innovations in higher education. What's working, what's not in the current system, what are workforce changes that are also influencing the training programs that we have. And I've been at it for a couple of years now, and it's been a good ride.
Well, thank you so much. The goal of this panel is to have a free-flowing and organic discussion, so please feel free to jump in whenever and wherever you see fit. And we'll also dedicate about 5 minutes at the end to open things up for a quick Q&A from the audience. And with that, let's get started, and if Becky will answer this first question. The prior speaker, Jenny Dearborn, discussed some of the major trends that are redefining work from machine learning and AI to changing millennial expectations. In narrowing our scope a bit, what are some of the biggest challenges you see in the way that companies have approached employee and talent development over the past 5 years?
So some of the biggest changes, right? Some of the biggest changes that I've seen, speaking from the perspective of the past number of years, it's originally it was kind of like, here's your path, here's your learning path. You come to a company, they say, here's your onboarding program, you're a manager, here's your manager training, you're in data science, here's your data science training. What we're moving more towards is that ownership of development. So really allowing employees to come in, see what they need, and just provide them with the tools and resources to drive their own growth, drive their own development. Because as we know now, it's not about climbing that ladder, it's about growing your skills. It's about what did you do? What projects did you work on? Who did you work with? How did you manage stakeholders? So it's really important that we're really providing a more flexible learning and development experience that employees can kind of pick and choose what's right for them based on their growth path and the desired changes they want to make in their career.
Thanks for that response. That is definitely an interesting perspective on employee development. And Saba, if you could add in about how Coursera is approaching employee and talent development.
Yeah, so in March 2019, Coursera released its first Global Skills Index. It's a report that maps it maps 10 skills in business, technology, and data across 10 industries in 60 countries. So Coursera is the world's learning platform. It's got 42 million learners, and we've got learners from every country in the world. And the findings are really fascinating. 2/3 of everyone in every country is falling behind on critical skills, and 90% of these are developing economies. The second thing we found is there's a demand for cross-pollination of skills. So like Becky mentioned, there's business people want to get more data science, data science knowledge. Tech people want to study, tech people want to get better soft skills. And so we're seeing that has been an increasing demand in how skills are changing. And finally, we're also seeing that there is a high inequality in skills across the world. So Asia Pacific has a lot of inequality in it, in the Middle East. Europe is the leader in skills. Finland is #1 for business skills all over the world. Israel is #1 for data science, and Argentina is #1 for computer science skills. And in the US, we find that skills gap, or that skills inequality gap, also exists between different regions in the US. So the South is actually lagging on every single skills. And so the way Coursera approaches that is through the Coursera for Business model, which is essentially working with a partner organization or a workforce development organization to work with the L&D officers or people organization to curate learning programs that would best help the organization meet their goals.
Thank you. And Richard, drawing from some of your research at the Clayton Institute, what are some of the types of skill development most in demand today? And are there any strategies you have or signals you look to when identifying the important skills of tomorrow?
Sure, it's a good question. And kind of hearkening back to one of Jenny's slides, you saw there was like a staircase career trajectory, and there was also sort of a random Brownian motion, one and the other one. And what we're seeing there is that when a college degree used to give you a 50-year career, now it's leading to a few-year career. And people are having to go back to the well. And so the types of skill development that are most in demand right now are actually ones that we don't anticipate for more than a couple of months at a time or a few years at a time. And when it comes to the technological side, that can be very challenging for a corporation and for an education provider. They need to be able to quickly adapt to a new programming language that was non-existent a few years ago, or to a new way of looking at data science and big data. So we're seeing on one hand this rapid short course skill development that's very technical. And then on the other hand, we're identifying more and more that just the technical skills alone are not enough, and that we need more soft skills. And employers have been really pointing that out more and more over the past few years. We need better communication skills, we need better critical thinking skills, and the ability to just ask the right questions. And that's actually, when we look at what's going to be the case going forward, where we're looking to see, the education providers that are most likely to succeed, it's those that are able to take the technical skills training abilities and actually translate those over to the soft skills side, which is actually a thornier problem and much more complex to tackle.
Thank you. And the next question we have is again for Becky. How do you balance employee choice and self-directed learning with skills the enterprise needs? In other words, how do you provide and communicate a path for employee development that is aligned with your needs as a company, but also provides employees the freedom and flexibility to self-direct their learning?
So it's an interesting question because we are really moving away from that pathing and that programmatic approach to development. We want employees to be self-directed, to be autonomous, to drive their own career at Uber. We kind of say that your opportunities should be endless at Uber. There are tons of experiences you can have, and we value that on-the-job learning. So whether it's a project with another team or mobility practices where you can go work in another region, those experiences are really valuable. So I think about the skill development in whether it's a hard skill or soft skill. And I just think that the on-the-job learning you get, working with other people, sitting next to somebody who's working in a different coding language than you, or just continually applying it, that's how we get better. That's how we learn. So maybe it is a course up front. We don't do a ton of that. We do a lot of pairing people and mentoring people and throwing people into big problems and allowing them to figure it out. And I think it's the nature that is Uber, is that kind of like big, bold, try things. And that's kind of where we're going with our learning, is just get in there, give it a try. It's okay to fail and fail and fail to learn. And so I think that when we balance employee choice and self-directed learning, it kind of becomes one and the same, right? It's all your choice. It's all self-directed because the mentality is a growth mindset. It's hungry to learn, right? It's hungry to build new skills. And you could say, well, in 10 years, I want to be, I want to work on a farm. I want to work with my hands. Well, what are you doing today that's helping you get there? What can Uber do in your current role? Do you need more communication skills? Do you need more vendor management skills? Do you need more skills on managing a P&L? You can get that by doing it.
Can I ask a follow-up? We'll have about 5 minutes at the end for questions. Thank you.
I appreciate the
Well, thank you so much for that insight. And Saba, if you could perhaps speak to finding that balance between self-direction and aligning L&D with enterprise needs.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, Becky. I think there is a lot of self-directed learning, and curated learning is kind of the lines are getting blurred quite a bit. We, Coursera works with all kinds of organizations. Most of the organizations we end up working with are sort of mammoth organizations, more traditional in their management format, specifically working with Fortune 500s, working with workforce development organizations. And so we kind of espouse this notion of flexible structure. And what we mean by that is, we have a massive catalog of 3,500 courses right now, which includes courses, series of courses, degrees, everything, credentialed learning. And sometimes you see that and you get really overwhelmed by the choice that you have. And so, what we've done is we've kind of started to curate the best ofs in the different domains that we have and the different skills that we have. And then, we do a lot of case studies with our own customers as well, and we we work with them to curate a learning program that would work best for their employees. Whether that's an unlimited model, which is here's like instead of the 3,500, here's 100 courses that we've opened up, and your employees can choose from that, or it's a more sort of structured, I want my finance people to better understand how to use SQL or data science. And so we're seeing a blend of both in the work that we're doing with organizations.
Well, thanks so much for that response. Now moving back to Richard, I think you touched on this a little bit before, but what is the role that universities and higher education play in the future of workforce development?
If universities aren't careful, they're going to play a shrinking one. What we've noticed is that when there was more slack in the labor market, a lot of people were willing to just turn to the degree as a proxy for competency and say, you have a bachelor's, that's good enough for now. We need to filter through so many applicants that this will do. And they were using prestige at the university as a differentiator of quality. Now that the labor market is tighter, and we've actually started to recognize that when you lift up the hood of a degree, it's kind of a black box. And actually, sometimes people come in with some skills you don't need, or they're lacking skills you do, but skills are the unit of interest. And we're transitioning from a prestige-based performance axis to a skills-based one. And it's players that can actually make that transition to a skills-based marketplace, those are the ones that can disrupt the old model. And so universities can play a role. They can have a golden spot in the future of work if they're able to make that transition. However, the business model of universities, they're maladapted for rapid change. That's not what they typically do. And for us to expect most of the traditional institutions to make that shift is kind of asking a really old dog to learn some really new tricks. But we are seeing a lot of players that integrate with employers really well. And they actually start with, what skills do you need? And we will build a curriculum backwards from that. And we're seeing coding boot camps excel there. We're seeing some innovative universities like Western Governors University, Southern New Hampshire University do a really good job with that. And we're seeing sort of like this, the next wave of people saying, well, let's partner with the boot camp. Maybe that'll help us do that too. But I think we'll also see a lot of universities really struggle, and we'll see some not quite make it. But for them to make that transition, it's about, again, moving from prestige to skills.
Thanks. And Soba, do you have anything to add in regard to the role universities play?
Yeah, this is my favorite question, having worked with them every single day for over 4 years. And especially, so I work, when I was at Coursera, I used to work with academic innovation officers, and literally it was their job to figure out how can universities play a more meaningful, more relevant role when you think about the education to employment nexus. That being said, it was fascinating to see that, I worked with the University of Michigan all the time. They were my first client, and they were my client till the day I left. And it was interesting to see that within those couple of years, University of Michigan was able to create a name for itself in data science. They were the #1 Python programming course in the whole world. Like, if you search for this, Dr. Chuck is known for Python programming. And so now the University of Michigan is also entering into this place where it is focusing also on skills that are relevant in today's world, that are actually sort of applied skills. So we're now looking at universities. Penn has launched its online degree, the first one they launched on Coursera, and this is obviously Ivy League, called Masters in Computing, Innovation, and Information Technology. You would never imagine something like a Masters in Computing and Information Technology, which is a sort of a middle-skilled kind of degree, to come out of an Ivy League school. So we're beginning to see that transformation happen in higher education, where they are realizing that if they do not if they don't learn to play in the space, they will lose out.
And I just want to add to something that you both said around moving to that place of skills. I think it's skills and experience for higher education, because I can speak from my experience when I hire folks. I ask them how they've applied this, right? What have you done with this skill? What have you, and I think the projects people work on, the application of those skills is very critical in today's ambiguous workforce.
Yeah, it's all about knowledge acquisitions and absolutely application of that knowledge, for sure. Yes.
And Becky, across Silicon Valley, even the fastest growing and hottest tech companies struggle with employee retention. How can you invest in skill development in the age of rapid employee turnover?
That's a great question. I think that retention's an interesting one, because there is this kind of idea that we work for a company for a couple of years and then go work for another company for a couple of years and just continually gain those skills. But again, the question is, if you work for a big enough company, can you get that role and gain those skills, and then get another role within that organization and gain those skills? And I think that's kind of a new way of looking at employee retention, is not necessarily in that role, but if you have somebody who is really great, why not keep them? Why not train them in a new skill set? Why not move them to a new organization, a new country, and kind of retain them in that way? At the same time, I'm not blind to the fact that I don't expect my team to be at Uber for 20 years. I don't expect myself to be at Uber for 20 years. That's not realistic in this day and age. But I think that it's important to invest in your employees while they work for you, in all senses of the word, because even if it's 2 years, that's a huge amount of time this day and age. Everything changes every few months. So 2 years of an employee's time is incredibly valuable, especially somebody who is hardworking and contributing and passionate about the mission. I would say, invest as much as you can in those folks to get them to where they need to be.
And Soba, how do you think that enterprises should invest in skill development?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with Becky. I think one of the largest problems that organizations see as a sort of, the cause of employee turnover is simply employees get bored. I mean, they've been doing the same thing over and over again. And, and if your goal is, hey, this is a really strong employee, we've been able to get through the door, and they are brilliant, then you should figure out a way to keep them. So if an employee goes to you and says, hey, I'm really bored, I'm ready for my next challenge, instead of saying, instead of going and saying, hey, go to HR, apply through jump through the loop, jump through the whole loops, and then interview again with all the teams. I mean, this person has been working for you for several years anyway. You already know the value that they can bring. So you should work with the employee, I think, on a one-on-one basis to figure out what is that next step for that employee in their sort of growth pathway. And then I think I think employers and organizations should also really, support passion projects, because passion projects, a lot of them come out of, just the need for the employee to find a creative outlet and to be like, hey, I know I'm doing my day job and I'm doing a good job at it, but I want a new challenge, I feel like I can add more value in another area. And so I think those two things, meeting the employee where they are and figuring out what is the growth pathway from there, I think would be a great way for organizations to continue to invest in talent and skill development.
And Richard, any thoughts?
At least in what I've observed, I think it depends quite a bit on the nature of your employee pool. So we recently saw that Starbucks and Arizona State University, their partnership just reached 5 years of age. And that's one where the way Starbucks is investing in its employees is helping them finish a bachelor's degree, right? I imagine that's not often the case for a lot of people at Uber headquarters, who may already have a degree or even an advanced degree. So it depends a little bit on who you're dealing with. I've seen a lot of tech companies actually invest in nano degrees, for example, which I think is the Coursera platform.
Udacity.
Oh, that's Udacity. I'm so sorry. MicroMasters.
That's edX.
My goodness, there's just too many.
We're just simple, plain online degrees.
There you go. Keeping it vanilla, it's great. And so we're seeing a lot of these companies needing more advanced skill advancement to actually rely on things like coding boot camps, where they come in and get you, it's more of an upskilling from, you already have a bachelor's degree, that's great, we need more. So yeah, I think it depends a lot on your employee pool and what exactly the kinds of skills are that you're trying to develop.
Great, thank you so much. And that actually brings us back to our last question. And I want to leave a few minutes to give an opportunity for the audience to ask a couple questions. So if just going down the line, you could respond in about a minute or so, that'd be great. So given where tech is going in the next 5 to 10 years, how should companies be thinking about the future of their workforce, and how can employers use skill development as a tool to supercharge their workforce and retain talent?
Yeah, I think that I think going back to what Saba said around the experiences that people want, giving them opportunities to really grow through 20% projects, passion projects, that can align to your company's mission. So if you give employees autonomy and purpose, they will go out and get it. That is kind of the new way that people want to learn. They want to grow their own skills. They want to create their own career paths. So you just need to give them the tools, the resources, the knowledge to have that growth mindset, understand where to seek that out, potentially point them in the right direction, but really let people run. So I think it's skill development through experiences.
Yeah, so Coursera is a learning company, so it does a couple of things. One is it opens up the entire course catalog to everybody who's a current employee and alumni employees, because it wants to cultivate this culture of being a lifelong learner, which means you need to, and one of the most popular courses actually on Coursera is called Learning How to Learn. Because if you can learn how to learn, then you can stay ahead of the curve at any given, no disruption will throw you into a panic attack. So that's one. The other thing that Coursera does is actually do every 6-month basis, we have something called the Coursera Makeathon, which essentially is a week where on Monday you kind of come in and you say, hey, here's something that I want to do, whether it's improve a process, new project, improve the product, and then on you find a team and you find people you don't work with on a regular basis. you create a prototype and then you kind of reveal it at the end of that week, and then everybody kind of votes on it based on the different values that Coursera has. And a lot of the projects that came out of that Makeathon, it's now in its 16th iteration, have made it to the product, right? Because now you're giving people, your employees, a space where they can actually act on their passion project and not feel like they're wasting their time or not doing the thing that the boss wants them to do. I think another thing is just take advantage of the millennials that are in your organizations. I mean, these people are ahead of tech. Like, if I work now with folks that are a couple of, like 10 years younger to me, and they're on tech that I've never even heard of, right? And this is just a 10-year gap. So like when you're talking about traditional organizations, that gap is really big. So take advantage of that and maybe have buddies with a millennial employee with more with the senior employee, so that they can kind of cross-pollinate skills and learn from each other. But I think, and because these guys they are tech-enabled. I mean, they have a camera in their face the second they're born. So there's no better person to go to in your organization than your millennials if you're thinking about how do I upskill in terms of technology and knowing also what's out there.
I don't have quite as much to add because I am not working at like a large enterprise situation and actually overseeing the growth of employees. But one area that we are excited about at the Institute, it's our future area of research, is skills assessments and just what are the technologies around that. And we talk so much about technologies, leading to the automation of jobs and the replacing of jobs, but there will also be technologies that will enable the creation of new ones, and it'll help understand not only where people are in their skill set, also where they want to go. And even if it's not a matter of pathing explicitly and trying to give more autonomy instead, it's still valuable for employees to know what their options are. And that technology is one to invest in going forward. It's still kind of a nascent space, but we anticipate the next 5 to 10 years it's going to develop quite a bit.
Great. Well, that brings us to the end of our panel. And if there are any questions in the audience, we'll come around and grab you a mic.
Great, thanks. This is a question for Becky. You said that you're moving kind of away from pathing into pairing of people and mentoring. And so my question is about how do you match the people, and if this is self-directed, and if it is self-directed, how do you counter personal bias?
So a number of different ways. There's a number of different mentorship-like programs at Uber. One is a specific sponsorship program for women and URGs. We're running that globally right now very successfully. So that is one big way that we are countering personal bias. D&I is the front and center of Uber of everything that we do. I sit right next to our D&I team. We partner very closely. So that is a great point. In terms of mentoring, there are mentorship programs that we are running that are formal. It's those are typically run in partnership with the business and HR, so we can kind of have a little bit of oversight. And then there, of course, is the mentoring through employee resource groups. There is kind of go out and find it yourself, and so that there is probably a little bit of bias that creeps in when you do it yourself. But we do have other systems and tools in place to make sure that there's not an imbalance of mentorship and an imbalance of looking at the top and seeing yourself there. Great question.
Apple couldn't have developed iPhone without acquisition of Fingerworks, the multi-touch company. Many companies, corporations in Silicon Valley have replaced corporate innovation with corporate acquisition. Especially disruption has to come from outside by definition. You won't disrupt Uber. Somebody else from outside will disrupt Uber. So can you talk about corporate acquisition as a replacement for innovation? Because corporations spend so much money on internal innovation which doesn't bring results. And finally, they end up acquiring outside innovation.
I might be able to share one thought on that. So the Christensen Institute is named after Professor Clayton Christensen, who's over at Harvard Business School and developed a number of theories around disruptive innovation. And I guess one of his landmark observations was that, yes, disrupting oneself is extraordinarily difficult, that the odds are usually against you. often because your business models prevent you from innovating and expanding beyond your weaknesses. One way of doing that would be to develop what he calls an autonomous business unit, which is what IBM did. Initially, they realized that they wanted to get into the personal computer market, but they couldn't do that inside their own house. So they opened up another office in another state up in New York. And that was their way of creating an autonomous unit that could sort of be that external force against itself. But you're right. Acquisition is not going to be an automatic innovation play. Not if you're trying to disrupt yourself. It can be a way to enhance your products and services. But for self-disruption, it's possible. It's just difficult. You have to kind of know the right strategies. And there are a few self-disruption, quote-unquote, strategies that do exist, and we've seen them work before. Does that get at your question a little bit?
Well, unfortunately, we're just out of time, but I just wanted to thank our panelists again.
Sorry, he had a question during the panel, so if we could just take that since.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about all your perspectives on this, but it seems like you're sort of relying on employees to be self-directed and also to a large degree autodidactic self-learners. And I guess I want to push on that a little bit, and I'm going to give a very rosy perspective, which I appreciate and value, but when you hire people, you also need them to do the job they're hired to do. And so you can't just let them run out and learn whatever new skills they want at the expense. And so there's a trade-off there that you have to make. And on the other hand, you've got platforms like Coursera and Udemy and the rest, where the completion rates on those programs, like on the degrees, are it's not your fault, right? People are really bad at finishing the things they start. And so I'm curious about both how you scaffold in the structure necessary for people to complete the development of the skills that they're interested in obtaining, but also how you balance the trade-off of providing that opportunity with the work they actually need to do.
So for in the ideal world, it's not necessarily a trade-off, it's marrying the two, right? It's you've come here to do this job. What are your goals? What are your values? What do you believe in? What do you want to be in 10 years? And then it's connecting the dots. Okay, you're in data science, but you want to move towards, you want to be a professional singer, right? Two things that are very disconnected. It's connecting the dots, and this is actually a critical manager skill that we're training for, is understanding how to develop career, how to have those career development conversations, how to connect the dots, and it's learning on the job, right? It's not go off and learn how to sew and then come back, or go off and take music lessons in the middle of the day and then come back. It's what are those experiences that will benefit both the learner or both the employee and Uber. Because we're not pretending you can go off and do whatever course you want and all the time, all day. But we do believe that if you want to grow, you can grow here.
Yeah, I think one way that we've seen, a lot of organizations implement a learning program is essentially just build it into your OKRs, right? If a single OKR, if you have a professional development OKR for every single employee, and you know that the skill that they want to acquire will actually end up helping you, then just build that in, because then once you've built in some mechanism of performance measurement, you'll see that learning will not be wild, wild west. There will be sort of an end goal, and it'll kind of help everyone out.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And thank you to our panel. They were wonderful this evening. I apologize that there's not more time for questions. They will be here during happy hour this evening, so hopefully you'll get a chance to chat with them then. Next to the stage, I would like to invite Alec and Gary for our fireside chat.
Take your pick. It's my good side. We'll do our best to keep the camera on that side. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Alec Wright. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer here at GSVlabs. It's an absolute pleasure to get 15, 20 minutes with you to have a quick conversation with Gary Swart. I'm going to do Gary a favor and not try and introduce him because the history is a little too long and too interesting and pedigreed. But I'll throw it over to Gary in a second to give a little context on his background. But the goal of this conversation is to really marry a lot of the topics that we've been talking about today with what's happening in the market and how that's changing, how organizations are accessing and developing and leveraging new talent models. And I think there's no one who's in a better position to share some insight on that than Gary. So Gary, I'd love to maybe share a little bit about your background and why we called you up here as a thought leader on the future of work.
Well, the operative word being long, because I'm old, let's face it. I started at a little company called Pure Software. It was Reed Hastings' first company, the Netflix CEO. And prior, and then that was called Pure Software. Pure went public in the mid-90s, a series of mergers, acquisitions, and ultimately became part of IBM, where I spent a couple years before going to a little company called IntelliBank. And then I ran a company called Odesk, now Upwork. Upwork went public in October of last year, finally. I ran that company for about 9 years. We merged it with Elance, created Upwork. And then since then, I've been an investor at Polaris Partners, primarily focused on what I call future of work companies, which is a pretty broad category, but have surrounded myself with things focused on helping find employees, make employees better, train, retrain, et cetera, employees.
Awesome. And I think when you were taking the helm at Odesk, it was one of the pioneers in at least what we like to call the freelancer economy, and starting to flexibly, agilely leverage technology and talent outside of the organization. I'm curious, like from day one when you walked in there and you saw this future of work market developing, how have things evolved over the past 5-10 years?
Well, thanks for giving me the benefit of the doubt and assuming that I saw it when I walked in there. I actually didn't get it. I had a friend who said, "You want to be the best in the world at staffing? Is that what you want to do?" And I was like, "Oof, when you put it that way, I don't know." But it turned out to be much more than I bargained for. I got lucky in picking the company, and I was there for about 3 or 4 months before I realized the potential. You're right. We were super early on in taking work that was done in the offline world and moving it online. So it wasn't like a platform like Elance or Freelancer or some people that were before us where it was about a fixed price project. This was about hiring a person regardless of location. And it was about replicating offline work online. So most of us go to work based on time. As long as you deliver decent work in the time, you get a paycheck every couple of weeks. And that was what we set out to build, to replicate time-based work. And in the early days, you had to convince people. It was what I call a change mode sale. You had to convince people to work in this manner because it wasn't outsourcing. It wasn't taking something you were in control of and throwing it over the wall. It was you're still in control. I work for you. I just happen to do it from a different location. And so we had to help people to find the right talent, manage that talent as if it was in their own office, and then pay that talent seamlessly, globally, legally, compliantly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we focused on the very small, you could even argue desperate businesses. We had desperate businesses and desperate workers, extra small businesses, mostly technical work, onshore clients and offshore workers. That tiny little market enabled us to say, hire offshore programmers cheap. Today, hundreds of categories make up 90% of the work. So very much like eBay started with Beanie Babies and Pez dispensers, and Amazon started with books, and look where they are today, 20 years later. We started small businesses, technical workers, offshore, and today the business has grown quite a bit since then. So much has changed, but the global macro trends, I think, are the same.
Well, and it's a perfect segue into my next question, which is I think what really drove probably the phenomena that was taking this work online, that gave Upwork and that industry so much opportunity, was this skill and talent gap that has been the consistent theme throughout the entire day of this wild new world we live in, where the number of Jenny Dearborn's comment was there are 500,000 computer science job openings. We're going to graduate 45,000 computer science graduates this year. Where's that gap? And so as you look at that, what do you see are kind of the in-demand skills of today and tomorrow that are driving organizations to think differently about how they access talent?
Well, it's really funny you say that. The thing about on-demand work is more work is going to move into this flexible category. There's a guy by the name of Tom Malone, professor at MIT. He wrote a book called The Future of Work 10 years ago. And his quote, I love it because he said his dad had one job his whole career. Tom, who's probably in his 50s, said he'll have 7 jobs in his career. And he said his kids will have 7 jobs at one time. So this idea that, the learners of today, kids coming out of college, they'll have 10 jobs by the time they're 40. If you do the math, that's a new job every 2 years. So how can companies prepare for that? You spend 90 days to hire somebody, not to mention all the time and energy and cost associated with that. Then you train them. And then it takes you 6 months to figure out if they're any good. And if they're not, now you have to get rid of them. There's severance and everything else. And the good ones leave. Why? Because millennials will have 2 jobs on average, a job every 2 years, 10 jobs by the time they're 40. So companies have to be more innovative. You got to think about how are you going to attract talent, train talent, retain talent, repurpose talent. And but this doesn't even answer your question. Your question is, what are the jobs? Like, what are the skills? It's obviously, you can look at the, engineering jobs, anything around machine learning and data and voice. I heard a statistic that said a team of voice engineers was acquired by Google, and the price was $10 million per engineer. Good friend of mine, we were just talking about, Jim McLean, ran a company called Silicon Valley Data Sciences. They were bought by Apple. Why? Because Apple wanted 50 data scientists in one fell swoop. So there's not enough engineers. I know it's hard to believe. I have a son who just graduated college, and he had a bevy of job offers. And, it's super impressive. All of his friends coming out of college, everybody's getting good jobs. So I think, technical skills, go-to-market skills, I don't see it going away anytime soon.
And I was amazed. We were doing some freelancer projects a couple months ago, and one of the most on-demand jobs right now is in graphic design. And even what we don't necessarily think of is those technical skills, just as things digitize. Do you see the enterprise coming to terms with this and really acknowledging that they need to think fundamentally differently, or are you just seeing pushing at the margins?
In the early days, if you think about software as a service, the early days of SaaS, there was a little company called Salesforce.com. And Mark Benioff was, selling his software to very small businesses. It wasn't even Mark. It was a guy by the name of John Dillon was the CEO. Average number of seats. What do you think the average number of seats the first 3 years Salesforce was in business? Any guesses?
4.
Yeah, it was 5. It was 5 seats. So they were selling to tiny businesses. And Larry Ellison, right down the street, was saying, we don't see these guys competitively. And he was right. Tom Siebel didn't see him competitively because they weren't selling to the same audience. And if you tried to sell Salesforce to the likes of Cisco or Merrill Lynch or a big corporate enterprise, those organizations would say, you want us to put our customer data in the cloud? We're not going to do it. But today we're putting our customer data in the cloud, our infrastructure in the cloud, our security in the cloud, our finances, everything. It's 20 years later, and everything is going in the cloud. And work is just further out that continuum. But interesting, talent is the single biggest lever and expense that companies have. And so your question, are enterprises waking up to it? They're going to have to, right? Because of what we were just talking about. The talent war isn't going away. It's just as expensive, competitive, time-consuming, et cetera. And knowing that the workforce and the demographics and the environment and the economy and all these things demand that you do more with less, companies are going to have to think of a more innovative way to get work done. So one statistic, in 2006, 0% of our work done through our platform ODS came from enterprises. Today, that number is somewhere between 18 to 20%. So similarly, now SaaS is moving up into bigger and bigger enterprises. Work will continue to follow that theme as well. And so more and more companies are waking up to it because traditional methods aren't working anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm the firmest believer that a lot of people aren't going to wake up to it, and they're going to pay the consequences for that. And there's a reason why 50% of the S&P 500 aren't going to be here 20 years from now, and talent's probably one of those driving dynamics. I'm curious if, in what you're looking at the landscape, and when you're looking at folks that are trying to be forward-thinking about talent, is there anyone who's doing a really good job at it, and that you would point to as a beacon that other folks should be looking at?
Well, I think there's a lot of good examples. And some of it, you don't know if it's just PR or if it's actual practice. So I spent time at the Aspen Institute talking about this very subject, which is where I met Tom Malone and others. And Google was there, and the executives in charge of talent at Google. And I was super impressed with this whole 80-20-10. 80% of your job is core, 20% is an adjacency, and then 10% can be whatever you want, whatever passion you have, whatever you want. And the reason they do that is to keep employees happy. They want to make sure that people feel like they're checking all of their boxes, their impact box, their growth and development box. They're not just showing up and making widgets. And I thought that was really impressive. Now, I've heard from some people that work at Google, I don't know if anybody here, that that's not true. You have no time to work on whatever you want because you're so busy on your core job. Another innovative thing that Google does is that if you leave, they ask your manager one question. They say, was this a regrettable churn or not? And if the answer is yes, we were sorry to lose this person, then you immediately go into a pool, and there's a team of recruiters at Google that do nothing but go after leave or unregrettable churn. And their job is to call you and say, hey, how's it going? You're doing a startup. Anything we can do to help? Oh, you're working on ML, huh? Hey, well, don't forget, we have a big M&A team. And a year later, they call, and they're constantly recruiting that great talent. So these are innovative things. Why? Because you've already trained these people. You already know they're good. You've tried before you bought, and it's worked out well. Companies like WordPress Automatic and have seen that they're 100% remote. They had this beautiful office in San Francisco. It was incredible. They don't have it anymore. They have no corporate headquarters. They meet in places, but they're all remote. That's a multi-billion-dollar company. So things like this. Oh, you probably just saw Stripe. They were. It was one of these Amazon-like things, like where's their next development center going to be?
And Old St. Louis.
No,
Oh.
They said their next development center is going to be nowhere. It's going to be in the cloud. And so it's going to be a distributed team of hundreds of workers from wherever they happen to live around the world. And so that's why we created Odesk, for that very reason. Talent doesn't have to live where the jobs exist. Talent, the job should be able to go to the person who's most qualified, regardless of where they live.
Well, what feels like the common denominator about these organizations is that talent's moving from the periphery, that's something that sits in kind of, the back office, into, Google becoming a talent organization, building that into their core DNA. If you were sitting across the table from, a large organization, whether they be a 150-year-old company or, 25 years old and starting to reach maturity in today's market, what advice would you have to start moving that, aircraft carrier towards a talent organization rather than one of cogs and, wheels?
Well, I think you can't assume that all work can be done remotely or differently. There's some jobs where you have to be face-to-face. Some people say that ideation, it's good if you're in the same room, but then execution can happen in a distributed fashion. And, we come together, we have meetings, we share information, we make decisions, and then we go away and execute on our work. And so I think you have to define what type of work, what jobs can be done this way. And then it doesn't have to be all work. And so one example I like to use is e-commerce. So what percentage of goods are bought online in the US versus on-site? Anybody have a guess? About 12%. It's pretty low. I thought 5 years ago that it was 30%. So I'm shocked to know that it's only 12%, and that's after 25 years of e-commerce. So is it conceivable that some percentage of work could move online after 25 years? And it doesn't have to be even 12%. Let's just say it's 5%. So 5 out of 100 employees don't show up here at GSV. They happen to work for you remotely. And it doesn't even have to be 5. It could be 5 full-time equivalents. It might be 20 people who all work part-time. And most of our customers, and this was years ago at Odesk, most of our customers would say, that's a no-brainer. Like, of course I could imagine 5. And even if you don't imagine 5, just say 2. 2 out of 100 come to work remotely. Believable? Does that make sense? And what does 2% of all work look like? That is a massive, massive number. So the net of it is that the advice I would give a big company, which is your question, is that traditional methods, that they're not going away. You're still going to hire on-premise people. You may still outsource work. You may hire local temps from an agency to come in and do work for the next 3 months or so, and then you don't need them anymore. That absolutely makes sense. And you're going to do other things. You're going to have agencies, you're going to have contractors, and you may even have remote distributed workers. So I think some subset of those companies have to look at how to get best and highest use out of their resources.
But it just seems like it's going to require a level of thoughtfulness, into the omni-channel talent market that a lot of organizations just haven't built today.
So everybody knows the company Thumbtack. They're like Angie's List 2.0. It's home services via the web. They just raised a big round of funding. I was an early advisor for Thumbtack. They were a big Odesk customer. The way I got to be an advisor was they were such a big customer. They were always asking me for advice because we were kind of figuring it out together. We were using our own service. We had 500 full-time equivalent remote workers working for Odesk, so eating our own cooking. And Thumbtack had hundreds, so they were the next biggest one like us. And we'd get together in Redwood City and they'd say, gee, how are we gonna pay these people? We're really breaking the mold. We wanna hire more. Like Jonathan just sent me a message, one of the co-founders and board member, just sent me a message last week saying, hey, we're finally off of Upwork. We opened our own agency in the Philippines. And he sent me a chart of their work and how it had risen to thousands of workers. They spent $34 million over the last 8 years on Upwork. That's innovative. Like they said, in his note, he said, we would never have been able to build our business if it wasn't for your service. And so you hear that and you're like, that's innovation. So yes, the big companies are gonna get it, just like they got SaaS and it's evolved. Work is gonna be further out that continuum.
It's so interesting to think about, the startup community, and it makes a lot of sense when you're doubling, tripling the size of your team every 6 months. New models of work are needed. But I'm curious, as you're looking as a general partner and as an investor, and you're looking at these future of work companies, what are some of the trends, or maybe trends are the wrong word, but opportunity spaces that you're getting excited about, and you think there's going to be a big business in, coming down the line?
Well, knowing that finding talent is so hard, anything that helps you to streamline the accessing talent, like, in a lot of cases, it's top of a funnel problem. You've got, how do you separate the wheat from the chaff? And you don't want more applicants, you want a high quality applicant. And so you look at a ton of things around staffing. And now that you've hired employees, how do you train them? And how do you make sure that they have the skills that they need? And what if you need to retrain them? And so I've looked at a lot of things in that area, and I get excited about those. There's a lot of companies, a company called Pymetrics that I didn't invest in that does psychological profiling. So they'll go to like Goldman Sachs as a client, and they'll look at the characteristics of their most effective or best workers, and then they'll look for those characteristics by giving the same battery of tests to applicants. And it turns out that it's not always Harvard or Stanford. It could be, Michigan or Maryland, and they wouldn't know that if they didn't do these tests. And then anything that helps with the sort of frequency and competency of workers. The competency piece, how do you make sure that if people are in front of customers or they're doing their job, that they're competent to do their job? And then how do you know that they're actually doing a lot of that job? And so you look at a lot of sort of productivity solutions and the like, stuff like that.
No, makes a lot of sense. And one final question, I think it's a great way to end it, and it's something I love to ask anytime I get someone up here who spends so much time kind of thinking about one space, which is, there are a million different trends and topics that we're talking about today, and that are on the radar, and that if you go to any work conference, there's going to be a half dozen panels on. What's something that we're not talking about today, but you think a year from now or 2 years from now is going to be kind of top of the totem pole, is really important to have a strategy around?
Well, I haven't been here today, and I'm sorry because I feel like I've missed out. But a lot about retention, like how do you, if you're going to spend so much to acquire somebody, and then you're going to train them, and you're going to invest so much in them, knowing that they're likely to leave in 2 years, that's a huge, like you can't afford to do that. Yet you don't want people there who don't actually want to be there. Like if they don't want to be there, like I'll be the first one to say, you should go do what you really want to do. Like let's not, so how do you inspire people to stay and to love what they do? And so I don't think enough is invested in, really understanding what people want out of a job and career and life, and then hiring people that you can deliver that for, right? You hire people and then they punch out. I actually had coffee this morning with somebody who worked at Google for 4 years. He was there a year and a half, dream job, everything was going great, and they shuttered his department from 1,300 employees to 200 people overnight. And he was able to find something else, but he wasn't passionate about it. But it's hard to leave because they pay so well, they take care of you, and companies have to get better at that if you're going to invest in this talent. I didn't invest, but I saw a company that I thought was doing a really nice job of what they call career pathing. And what they do is they ask employees, well, what do you want? And you may not tell your manager that you want to be a dancer, but you might fill out some cards or fill out a profile. And then what they try and do is give you a career path of how you can get that. So if you say you want to be an accountant, but you're in sales, they might say, hey, you know, we pay for a class right here at College of San Mateo. Go take accounting class and go have lunch with the controller. And they start doing things, and it's all automated. So what I love about that is it makes the employees feel like, wow, this company cares about me, and the manager has to do nothing, you know. And so things like that, I think, are going to be more important.
Well, that's great. We'll have to have you back here next year to talk about the 20 cool things you've seen in the retention space over the past year. But thank you so much, Gary. Really appreciate the time. And, you know, always wonderful to have you here to share your perspective.
Happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Alec and Gary, for your insights. And thank you to all of our speakers and our panelists today. It was wonderful. I would now like to invite all of you to the other side of our kind of downstairs building for some happy hour and networking.